Okay, so now there's multiple timelines? Multiple timelines? Multiple timelines. Multiple timelines.
So hey.
Timelines? Can we just... It's time for the after credits scene. What's going on, guys? Rodney here with the after credits scene. We're breaking down episode 2 of Loki. There was a whole lot going on in this episode, and like we talked about in our prediction video, this episode, just like the first one, was real dialogue heavy. We got a little bit of backstory on Mobius in the form of his obsession with the 90s, which I personally loved, but not as much as I'd hoped. However, Miss Minutes and a lot of conversation with Loki about the different videos he'd watched with the TVA gave us a lot more of the rules associated with the multiverse, and I think we're going to get a lot more of that moving forward. Things like how the pruning grenades work, why they prune things, how different variations work, and how the timeline moves. Those things are going to be really important moving forward, and I think we got a few little glimpses of some timeline anomalies outside of those rules. And moving forward, I think that's going to be really important to point out. In the prediction video for this episode, I pointed out that we need to pay close attention to all the different variations and the things that are going on outside of the timeline rules that they're sharing, because whenever those things start coming into play, I think there's a bigger twist there. Having said that, we got a big reveal at the end of the episode that we'll talk about in just a minute that is really important moving forward, given how soon they showed it to us. First off, let's just start right at the beginning of the episode, setting up the stage with our variant, giving us another attack, this time in Oshkosh, Wisconsin in the 80s. We got to see a different variation of Loki's powers, or this variant's powers, obviously, and in the form of, touching of the forehead and transferring consciousness, and then that was played off of a lot near the end of the episode. That was really cool, and I think that's going to be important moving forward. The green eyes, the uncertainty of who's working for who and who's under the influence. You only see that at the beginning, and then after that the person looks normal. So I think that's going to come into play later on as a form of who's who and who to trust, along with all this timeline stuff. Just adds to the mystery. As they walk into the fairgrounds and they get into the big tent, the music playing and the announcer's voice were a big giveaway as to what was coming. Not only does it say who's going to show up here, our princess, and then it says, is there an evil power or will a hero emerge? And then the song starts playing, I Need a Hero. Obviously the song is sung by a woman, and so you're getting a lot of foreshadowing there, talking about who's this person going to be. You get a little more of that later on as well. But as the battle unfolds, that song choice, especially for the 80s, was really funny and catchy. And then the foreshadowing there that this person, this villain, this character, is it a hero? Is it a villain? Is it a guy? Is it a girl? Those kind of things were really, really cool to play off of, and kind of a really nice nod moving forward. Again, in this episode, Miss Minutes gave us a lot of information, just really quick snippets about how the multiverse works, and testing Loki and kind of giving him a test of what did you learn and how did this happen and do you know what this event is and that event is. We get a little banter back and forth there with him. A lot of shots of Loki behind a desk, cubicles, reading in the library section, all these different things where you got a lot of that dialogue, including walking through Oshkosh, where he's kind of getting quizzed again by the time variant keepers, talking about, do you know what this grenade's for? Do you know what that's for? And him being able to rattle that off is not just for him, that's for us as well, obviously. And so we're getting a lot of those things here. Didn't get as much world building as I thought we would, except to see a couple more timelines and to get a little bit of other sets and things like that in the form of Ravona's office and the different library settings and some other places in the TVA. I was I guess a little bit bummed by that the episode stayed a little small, but the parts that I was excited for is when they actually did get to jump in the timeline, which I think is interesting because that's the only time Loki was excited either. He was stuffy in the offices, but then he was ready to jump into different timelines. The scenes with him in Pompeii and then obviously in Alabama, thanks for that one, Marvel, were really, really cool and exciting to see them play with different locations and different times. The detective portions of the story were really nicely woven in, and the cleverness of hiding in apocalypse scenarios and the metaphor, even though it was really goofy with the salad and the salt and things, the writers taking time to give us the metaphor of what that looks like and what that means. I'm really confident that they're going to flesh this story out in a way that we understand, that's not going to take us so far off that it leaves our heads scratching. I think it also leans into the idea that there's going to be a big reveal later on that has nothing to do with the villain. I think we got a little bit of a hint of that because we see who that person is at the end of this episode, 2 episodes in, and we still have quite a few to go. But I'm really confident that when we get to those big reveals, we've got enough multiverse rules and enough foundation here that we're not going to be totally in the dark. We're really going to understand what's going on. I think as we were looking at the variants going on, especially in Oshkosh, as Loki is stalling for time, the red line has popped up multiple times in the last 2 episodes. I think the idea of the red line moments it was obviously important because they were trying to explain to you that if the timelines go beyond that red line, something bad's going to happen. But I get the feeling that we're going to go beyond that. That somehow going beyond that red line is some bigger moment than just what we've been told so far. In addition, everything kind of comes to a head at the end of the episode as we see the different time grenades going off and them all being dropped into different time periods, and the lights in the Rock's Cart store end up turning red. The imagery there was not just foreshadowing, it was very on the nose to let you know something bad's happening, and it involved that red line. The little things that I wanted us to point out that I want you guys to pay attention to, the conversation with Ravonna in her office with Mobius was the only off-putting portion of the episode. There were a lot of things that were a little too on the nose in there for it to just seem like a bureaucratic conversation that these two were having, where the detective is trying to get his point across and the hard-nosed sergeant or lieutenant or whatever is saying, no, you can't do that, and I'm warning you, and all those different things. I thought it was it played a little cheesy, and the lines didn't quite fit, and so that whole scene bothered me a little bit, that there are things there. That's the one part that I thought, okay, Mobius is the good guy. Ravonna here, there's something up with her. The fact that she keeps all of Mobius's trophies in her office and he's not allowed to keep them. The fact that somebody else has been in the office not using a coaster and there's multiple rings on the table next to him. And he doesn't seem like he realizes that, or there's a version of him that doesn't use a coaster, or that she has to remind him somehow. I think that, especially that, they lingered too long on that shot of the coaster and the rings on the table for it to be a coincidence. I think they really wanted you to pay attention to that, because I think at some point he's going to go back in that room and those rings aren't going to be there, or he's not going to use a coaster, or he is going to use a coaster. That interaction is going to change. Now, whether his memory's wiped or it's a different version of him, or we get thrown into another timeline without really knowing it. There's an episode where it looks like everything's business as usual, but you get in that room and that's your tell. I'm not really sure, but it was a little much and a little on the nose for it to be just part of normal dialogue, especially given how dialogue-driven the show is. They would have thought through those things, and then to have some scenes like that where we're pointing out stuff on the wall and we're looking at the rings on the table, and he makes a comment like, "Oh, have you had somebody else in your office other than me?" Or a different, it just was a little awkward. And so I think repeat viewings of that scene are going to glean a little more. Again, there were a ton of Easter eggs in this episode, especially, and somebody on Twitter before the episode was even over had already zoomed in on the different locations of the different anomalies within the timeline, the branches, and we got stuff all over the universe, not just in different places on Earth and different times, but there were things in Ego, which I thought was a really cool nod, Asgard, Hala, all over the place, all over the MCU and all over the universe. And there's going to be a lot more Easter eggs to come, so make sure you pay attention for our Easter egg video coming up here in a couple days. The end was really where all this kind of came together, and I was glad they gave it to you early on. In our prediction video a couple days ago, I made the comment that there's something else going on here. There's not going to be a big bad guy or a really good guy, because Loki is not that guy. Loki is kind of in between. He's this moral gray area. And a lot of the stories that have been told lately, especially the Disney Plus shows, have really grappled with that moral gray area. With Bucky and Sam and John Walker, with Wanda and what she did, and managing her grief and all these different things. You got these moral gray areas. Agatha is not really as bad as you think she is, and you kind of like her a little bit. There's a lot of stuff there, and this one's no different. Loki already fits that mold, so to have a character like we see is not really that off-putting. And they even make a comment early on when Mobius and Loki are talking. He says, nobody's really all the way good as they seem, and nobody's as bad as they seem either. That every good person has some bad qualities, every bad person has some good qualities. And so there's great redemption story quality within those things, but it also makes your villains a little more interesting as well, and it makes your good guys a little more flawed, which makes you pull for them even more, actually. When we get the reveal that it is Lady Loki, which is what we're going to call her, I loved the small crown with the horns and just her cockiness and her whole story, and her just saying it's not about you. Still fits with a very selfish Loki persona. She's not saying it's not about Loki, but it's not about you. It's about me. It's about something else. And then all of the time grenades disappear and the timeline starts going crazy. Loki going after her is really going to set off the next episode. Mobius is definitely going to get in trouble because he's going to be perceived as losing Loki. The Minuteman that was in charge of Loki, as she woke up and came to, I'm sure she thought it was Loki's doing. And then for him to go into that portal after her is just going to set him apart and really get him in trouble, and now they're going to have to go after him, especially because he has no way back to them, and he's now going to be stuck with her. So you're going to get some dialogue with her. They're now in two different places, and Mobius is going to be on his own. The next episode is going to be really interesting. I think you're going to get a lot more flavor and a lot more story than we did here. There was a lot of cat and mouse in this one, and a lot of multiverse rules and time management type things. They moved the story along. It was an interesting episode, but not a lot happened until right there at the end that, oh, now there's something big. We got an introduction before. We got the villain in this one. We're going to say the villain for now, but we got that reveal really early on. And now we can get down to the main point of the story, which is who knows what. Not necessarily just pruning those branches, which is what I think the TVA is going to want to do, but something involving a bigger story here. And I don't think you're going to get that from anybody other than Lady Loki, and I think there's going to be some conversation there. We're going to get a lot more clarity moving forward. So, as always, I think, and I'm going to remind us every time, pay attention to those little clues where they're not giving you times, and they're giving you other hints that times have passed, like the rings on the table or different things like that, to understand where we are and what we're doing. Because I think when they start messing with timelines and multiverse and all these different things, they're setting you up. They're setting all of us up for something bigger. and setting us up for something that's a little bit twisty, which is why they're giving us all these rules. So when it does happen, we really understand. It's the same reason that they gave us all the little stories and all the little one-liners in Endgame before they actually dove into time travel. They had to set the rules and explain it and give you your boundaries before they did it. So we're getting a lot of that, and moving forward in episodes 3 and beyond, we're gonna start seeing them play with that. So tell us what you guys think. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you'll get notified every time we drop new content. Stay tuned for our Easter egg video, which will drop in a couple of days, and then our prediction video, which will drop a few days before next week's episode of Loki. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.